Okay. We will start with question number 2 with Mr. Mirkarini. That is, San Francisco has a unique situation of having had one sheriff for 30 years. What issues or challenges might this make for you in trying to institute changes?
Sheriff Mike Hennessy has actually been here 31 years, and by the time he retires will be practically 32. He's the longest-serving elected official in San Francisco's history, and I'm completely honored and humbled to have his endorsement, the only one of the candidates for sheriff that has his endorsement. He was never a cop. This race is not about who can out-cop whom. Any one of us has more peace officer experience than Sheriff Mike Hennessy. He was a prisoner legal services attorney, and what he did was break through the ceiling of showing what it means to innovate, the kind of programs on rehabilitation, reentry, even being criticized by liberal circles in itself. I believe that the reason why he's endorsed me to continue on his legacy and his tradition in making sure that San Francisco is prepared, ready, and able to make sure that we deal with what it means to improve public safety. And to improve public safety in San Francisco means taking care of those who are inside of the county jail system so that we effectively turn their lives around so that we reduce the repeat offender rates. That's what I've been doing for 7 years as a supervisor in my district in the Western Addition, and the 10 years before that in working in law enforcement, concentrating on improving public safety.
In regards to carrying on the sheriff's legacy, I believe that what you're referring to, in terms of endorsements, I have his professional endorsements. I've been promoted from the ranks of deputy all the way up to captain by the sheriff in doing the actual job. And the innovations that we had and the map for success that the sheriff has laid out as a visionary leader, I've been a part of that success my entire career in the sheriff's department. I've spent over 15 years there. I know the ins and outs, and I believe that change can actually come from within. I believe we have a strong foundation, as I mentioned in my first answer, and on that foundation, I think what we have is stability right now. Stability in the transition when we have our change in leadership is very key because we face this issue of realignment. And in addition to that stability, once we face the challenges and effectively come to a conclusion on how to deal with it and phase into it, I think the next step is to be able to change from within and grow from the foundation of success that he has laid.
Thank you. Mike Hennessy undoubtedly will go down as one of the greatest sheriffs in the history of California. But I would submit to you, there's only one Mike Hennessy, and none of us are Mike Hennessy. I was honored to be recruited 2 years ago by Mike Hennessy to be his undersheriff and had the honor of working for him for a year. And I think in my 30 years in public safety is the reason Mike recruited me. My 17 years on the street as a beat cop, 8 years as a labor leader in law enforcement, many years running the 911 center, many years in treatment, working in the prison system under Governor Davis, running the Walden House of San Francisco. That will be what brings me to the office of sheriff. I think my career has culminated in that office, Velvet, and I think that the office of sheriff is a big job at a time when we see the criminal justice system changing in front of our eyes. And I think I have the experience to lead the sheriff's department and to lead public safety in San Francisco with the rest of the city family involved in public safety and in the state of California.
Our third question goes to you, Mr. Miyamoto. How do you see the working relationship between the Sheriff's Department and the San Francisco Police Department?
I think we have a very strong relationship, and it's been a part of my career to be a part of that relationship as well. I'm a member of the Emergency Services Unit and also a member of the Special Response Team in our department right now, and this is one of our units in which we interact with the police department on a continuing basis. We provide mutual aid services to the police department for both spontaneous and planned events. We are always there to augment any law enforcement needs for the city and county of San Francisco. More importantly, I think, is the importance to make sure that because we have the same goals in mind in terms of public safety, we need to continue on this relationship. We've had many instances in the past where we've carried on additional duties as a department, which augmented the police department's primary responsibility for patrol in the city and county. And I believe that's where our role should lead also in the future as a department. We shouldn't be looking towards taking over what the police department does. We should be looking towards augmenting and helping them in what they do to achieve the goal of public safety.
Second.
So I think that's a great question, and I think Captain Miyamoto hit on a good thing, that the Sheriff's Department is 880 strong of qualified men and women that are more than capable of supplementing the mission of the San Francisco Police Department. I think what's more important is the sheriff working in conjunction and collaboration with the chief of police, the mayor, the district attorney, being at the table with the city leadership, because at the end of the day, what we owe our citizens is public safety. We owe them the best, and there's no reason we should not be working together. Between the 17,800 police officers, 880 deputies, the chief and the sheriff should be working together. Not only in a law enforcement perspective on the street, but for victims of violent crime, for our citizens that need services, for our young people in the county jail that are going to get out. Where are they going to go? What's the role of the police department there? And I think working with the chief of police and working with his staff, we can do a lot more and we can do a lot better in this city. And I think with Chief Greg Suhr and my experience in 25 years in the police department, I can do the job.
So it's time we elevate the level of deputy sheriffs and the role of public safety overall in San Francisco. And I think it's time that we recognize that you do have, and we do have, a small paramilitary army of over 850 men and women who have badges, carry guns, and have the same credential as those from the police academy. I believe that we can start small. For the 10 different district police stations that are around the city, we could have sheriffs wagon those that have been arrested and put in holding cells in those 10 different district stations instead of SFPD having to worry about the bureaucracy and book them into jail. And we can do it 23% cheaper from the sheriff's department. Never again should we see Chief Suhr be on news saying that they are understaffed at 49er games because there's post-tailgate violence. Deputy sheriffs could have been called up. In fact, it's insulting that we don't use the deputy sheriffs more. It's savings to taxpayer dollars, and we'll be able to satisfy the crunch of deficient staffing that the police department's always talking about. I'll make sure that I'm able to navigate that. In 6 years on the Budget Committee and the Board of Supervisors, I've already demonstrated how.
Okay, we go to a new question, and Mr. Connie, we start with you this time. And it's really still on this topic because the idea of merging the San Francisco Police Department and the Sheriff's Department come up a lot of times. If you were in charge, what would you think of this? Would you be for a merger or against it?
You know, well, I would oppose it based on what I've seen. I was the president of the Police Officers Association when this idea first came up, introduced by Supervisor Chris Daly. There was nothing there. There was no substance there. I met with the mayor at the time. I met with the chief of police at the time, and I believe I talked to the sheriff at the time. If there was some good government, some cost savings, some efficiencies, it'd be worth a discussion, but I've seen none. We have a great police department. We have a great sheriff's department. We have a 150-year history of both departments. We both have our distinct missions, and we can both work better together. But I see no basis to merge those two departments. And the other thing is what the people at home need to know is there's 58 sheriffs in California. It's a state-elected constitutional office. Every county, we are unique. Every other county in California has one sheriff and multiple chiefs. Excuse me. So it's not a good government, again, policy. There's no savings there. There's no efficiencies. And again, I believe we have a great sheriff's department and a great police department.
Could we get an answer from you? Yeah,
Sorry
Mr.
about
Miyamoto?
that. Okay. Just to alleviate any concerns from the prior question, actually, sheriff deputies are at 49er games now. We do the wagons out there, and we are a part of that public safety out there at the games. And also, one other thing I want to point out is that the wagons, there is a history of us actually working with the police department, and we have had the wagons at one point, the station transfers between the district stations. That's something that I did myself, and I thought was something that we could continue as well. And in terms of the merger question, in terms of whether or not this is going to be something that we would look into, I feel that the city charter, by bifurcating our duties, because of the uniqueness of San Francisco, is something that we should take into consideration also. I agree, and I don't believe that it is something we should explore at this time because I don't believe that it's good government right now. I think that the decision to keep us separate because of the uniqueness of San Francisco and because we have two agencies performing two different functions, I believe that it has been functional. It's been my career to be a part of the Sheriff's Department and to work with the police department. I think we should continue that relationship.
I apologize. It should have been you, Mr. Miracarini, right after.
I can go twice
Okay,
first next time
please.
if you like. It's quite okay. So I don't believe in merging the departments at all, but I would like to just sort of share with you why I think that that's partly a sensitive subject and one that hasn't been addressed on the panel so far. There's civilian oversight of the San Francisco Police Department officers. We have the San Francisco Police Department Commission, and we have the Office of Citizen Complaints. There's no civilian oversight for deputy sheriffs. The person who renders discipline over the deputy sheriffs when it's for discipline and interdisciplinary levels is the sheriff himself. And I think it's really important that people are aware of the fact that just as there are the hazards of abuse of power outside the jail system, there certainly are inside the jail system. And any lack of civilian oversight, I think, raises the concerns as to why we want to have strong civilian independent oversight that runs the sheriff's department. And that is exactly why I believe Sheriff Mike Hennessy has also endorsed me, because just like he was never tethered to the police department or the sheriff's union or either one, civilian oversight and independence is essential.
Our order is a little bit off because Mr. Wong isn't
I'll go
here.
first again, I don't mind.
Well, you're not first this time. There we go, back to.
Just to be fair.
We're going to have to start at the end of the table again, and this time we will go straight through. Okay, Mr. Mr. Kennedy.
Me? Okay.
Oh, I have to ask a question. don't I?
I'm good, but
Okay.
I'm not that good.
Right, okay. Well, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. There is a silent witness exhibit across the street in the State Building. How would you protect survivors and prevent the escalating incidents of domestic violence?
You know, Bill, as a sheriff and as an elected city leader, I think it would be my moral responsibility to stand up and be counted in San Francisco on the issue of domestic violence and any violence, obviously. I would not sit up here and pretend to be the expert. I would go to the experts. I'd go to, and I have done that. I'd go to the Domestic Violence Consortium. I'd talk to people like Beverly Upton. I would meet with the community of victims, and I would see what their needs are and how, as a sheriff, I can better those needs. The Sheriff's Department already has many programs in place, restorative justice, a lot of programs working with the convicted, the batterers. And also on that issue, under realignment, I'd be very careful to make sure that batterers don't slip through the cracks because their latest case may be a petty theft or a grand theft, but 2 or 3 cases back, they were actually convicted batterers. So that's another side issue on domestic violence. But again, I would go to the experts, I'd go to the community, I'd get their input, and as a leader, I would implement what needs to be implemented and support what needs to be supported.
Same question.
So as 6 years on the Budget Committee of the Board of Supervisors, I've come to the defense vociferously, enthusiastically, every time that then the previous mayor had tried to cut domestic violence programs in San Francisco. It was almost baffling that they would always be on the routine cut list, and we would come to its defense. Their arguments were never sound, always thin, and just recently, even because the civil grand jury had also announced that there's been improvements in domestic violence, this city's got a long way to go in improving domestic violence response that is culturally competent and multilingual, to communities and immigrant communities in particular, to same-sex communities in particular too. I want to certainly applaud the fleet of nonprofits that have been working, the Commission on the Status of Women, and everybody who's been working to really improve our lot in responding to domestic violence, but we have a ways to go, and just because we're making progress, that doesn't mean you cut funding. And as sheriff, I'll always make sure that on the front burner that we defend just as enthusiastically from the sheriff's perch as I did as a supervisor.
I believe very strongly in the programs that we have in place right now, and I think one thing to keep in mind here is that we have programs that bring components from all of the different things that we've been talking about here. Obviously, as the sheriff, it's our responsibility to make sure we have adequate funding, but the results of that funding, the concrete, tangible results of what I see in the jails every day, that's the difference, and that's what's going to make me a passionate advocate for this. We don't just have victims, and we don't just call them victims. We have a whole process of survivor restoration, where